In this video, we'll talk about some of the difficulties in learning how to pitch a baseball as an adult beginner. Is it even possible? And what are some of the challenges that you'll face? So if you're new here, I'm Dan Blewett. I'm a former pro pitcher myself. I've written a book on pitching mechanics and a number of other books on pitching and mindset. Feel free to check those out in the description below. In today's video, we'll talk about beginning pitching for adults. And this is a really big challenge. And I've seen actually a number of people on Instagram who have been doing this. They're just interested in the game. They want to learn because they love it. They find it fascinating. In fact, my dad did this when he was in his, I think, mid-40s. He wrote a book on pitching called The Science of the Fastball, which you can find on Amazon. It's a very well-read, or very well-written, thorough book. Definitely check it out. My dad said, hey, I think I can throw 80 miles per hour. I've learned so much about pitching, writing this book and watching me, that I want to give this a shot. I laughed. Dad, I love you. 80 miles per hour is a probably unattainable goal for someone who didn't play baseball as a kid, as my father didn't. But to his credit, he did make a lot of progress, probably gained 10 miles per hour over the 6 months or so that he stuck with it before realizing that I was right, that 80 was probably unattainable. So anyway, let's jump into it and talk about some of the difficulties in learning to pitch as an adult beginner. So number one, and this is, I'll give advice here at the end, but number one is don't make this about pitching first. You have to make this about throwing. And this is the same thing for all young athletes. You learn to throw a baseball really well first, and then you translate throwing into pitching. Pitching is throwing from the mound with a slightly specialized set of mechanics. But as you'll see in Major League Baseball, you can take an outfielder, put him on the mound, and he'll probably throw 85 miles per hour off the mound. Does that mean he's a good pitcher? No, but it's a reminder that throwing is pitching just from a downhill sloped mound. So understand that you want to be focused on throwing first and foremost, and the better you get at throwing, the easier the transition to the mound will be. It's going to be really difficult to pitch from a regulation mound, 60 feet 6 inches, if you throw below 65 and really more realistically like 70 miles per hour. Trajectories, breaking stuff, which I'll talk more about in a second. When your baseline is below 65, everything gets extremely loopy and it becomes difficult to throw strikes. It becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to throw any semblance of an off-speed pitch, whether that's a changeup, curveball, slider, whatever. And it becomes a lot more difficult to hold runners and for you to be a competent pitcher in general, because pitching is not just throwing towards a catcher, it's also holding runners and navigating and sort of being the general on the field. And I've seen this over and over. When I coach kids, when they make the jump from the 80-foot diamond or the Little League diamond all the way up to the big diamond, 60 feet 6 inches and 90-foot bases in the big field, it's a really big challenge for the kids who are too small to do that. And by too small to do that, I mean the ones who still look like they're elementary school kids, because there's always a mix of 13 to 14-year-olds who have the big growth spurt, or they're still waiting for that even into high school. And what you see is when pitchers are too small for the big diamond and they can't throw above 60 miles per hour, they really can't throw effective changeups anymore. Their curveball, they really can't throw it anymore. And really they end up just throwing fastballs, because when you take the speed reduction from your curveball, your slider, your changeup, whatever, off of only 65 or 60 or 55 miles per hour even, now that makes your changeup like 46 miles per hour, it's barely going to make it to the plate. Or your curveball, it's barely going to make it to the plate. And it's going to become so loopy to end up in the strike zone at such slow velocities that it just isn't going to get anyone out, and it's not going to work very well. So there is sort of like a minimum barrier to entry where you need to throw really realistically about 65 miles per hour to be competent, especially in adult league baseball, where these are all players who probably played throughout their youth, maybe in high school, probably in college, whatever. And if you're going out there throwing 55 miles per hour, it's not going to go well. The second big problem with becoming a pitcher as an adult is that you're not going to have the bony changes in your shoulder that are going to allow you to ever throw truly hard. And so there's a thing called humeral retroversion. This is your humerus bone. When you're young and you throw a lot as a young person, your humerus bone actually rotates back a number of degrees to accommodate this from the repeated stress of that throwing motion. And that's a positive adaptation that every hard thrower has that allows them to have that whip and that looseness in their shoulder, because the bone actually permanently rotates back. So if you didn't play baseball or softball as a kid, you have unfortunately missed that boat, and your throwing motion will always be more stiff than someone like me, or even someone who wasn't very good at baseball but did play Little League when they were younger. They will have more of that bony change, which allows them to have a more traditional, fluid, whippy looking motion that everyone wants. So in a sense, you'll just be fighting to maximize a much smaller potential window for velocity. So I don't know what that means. If that's 70 would be your potential max, or 75, probably not 80. That's actually very hard. I know it doesn't look hard on TV, but it's actually very fast. Your potential max velocity, I would guess, if you didn't play baseball at all as a kid or softball, is probably 70, 75. And so then getting to that 60, 65 threshold that we talked about for being competent off the mound, it's going to be tough. And that would take a lot of training to get into the 70s, where you're going to start to be much more competent. So let's talk more about off-speed pitches, which are extremely difficult. And this is one of the bigger challenges that you'll face as well. Because again, even though pitching is throwing off a mound, pitching isn't just throwing. You need to throw off-speed pitches in addition to having good command. And that means you're probably going to need at least two, a fastball plus a changeup and a slider or a curveball. So 3 total pitches is a typical arsenal. Developing the dexterity and learning to throw those pitches, it takes even very competent young people. When I coach young men, 15, 16, these boys are learning a slider, changeup, curveball. It's taken them a couple years for that pitch to be good, usually about 2 years. Now, they'll start to get it a little bit in a month or two, but it's just not going to be consistent where they can locate in the zone and throw it for strikes as consistent as they want, get the break to be very consistent. The bar is low for you to just grab a curveball grip and throw something that moves, but for it to actually be good enough to get hitters out takes quite a long time. And you also need the dexterity in your fingers just in general to learn how to manipulate the ball like that. And that takes a lot of reps throwing a ball. So if you're hoping that you're going to just start throwing and then in a couple months start to learn a slider and a curveball, you're probably not going to have very good dexterity in your fingers and the fine motor control that you'll need to really manipulate the ball the way you want it to. Plus, if you're only throwing in the 40s or 50s, a slider's not going to break very much, especially not at 60 feet, and a curveball is not going to either. So, and then a changeup is, again, maybe unlikely to make it to the plate in general without just being in the dirt consistently. So these are just big challenges throwing off-speed pitches when you don't throw hard enough. And again, the manipulation of the ball and the fine dexterity that it takes, it's actually quite difficult, and it's a long road to get there. So expect that to be something that is going to take a couple of years in my best estimate. And one of the biggest hurdles for becoming a good pitcher as an adult is just the time, the practice partners, throwing partners, finding a catcher, finding a mound to throw off of. These are things that are big challenges. It's not the same to just throw off a mound into like a little, a netted thing or a tarp that has compartments on it. That's all well and good, but getting feedback from a catcher is an important part of developing your repertoire. Throwing to a catcher in general is going to help you as you translate out to the mound. Sure, throwing to a target is going to be fine for a lot of it, but in general, to throw 4 or 5 days a week, having a throwing partner is really important. It's certainly not the only way to do it, but I think it's a really important thing, especially for accountability and for feedback. So if you're going to expect to stick with this for a couple of years, which is what it would take to be really competent, then you really need to find someone who's along for this ride with you. And that could be one of the biggest challenges that you face. For even me, I want to just play catch with someone here in DC every once in a while. And I find it really hard to find a throwing partner because people have full-time jobs, they have spouses, they have kids, they have a lot of stuff going on. It's a challenge. So that's one of the big things to account for. So takeaways. What are my things that I would recommend doing if you're a beginner and you want to learn how to be a pitcher in baseball? Number 1, be a student of throwing first. And that means you have to just learn to throw. Do not worry about the mound. Do not worry about all-speed pitches. Do not worry about any of that stuff being a pitcher until you are a very solid thrower. Throwing is the foundation, and that absolutely has to come first because you need something to translate onto the mound. So that's probably going to take you quite a long time, and your goal should be to throw the ball 150 feet on a firm line. That's about the velocity that you need to pitch off the mound with competence. So that's something to work to first. So I recommend playing catch or just, throwing at a low intensity 4, 5, or 6 days a week consistently for quite a long time. And I would say 2 days out of that week, long toss. That means just stretch it out, throw it as far as you can throw it. That's going to be positive for your mechanics. It's going to help you learn how to use your front side, your glove side, your legs, improve your arm action, your arm path, all that stuff. My next piece of advice is don't get bogged down with drills. Baseball players, softball players, they really don't learn from drills. They learn from playing. And throwing should be a play-based activity first. And so what does that mean? That means don't just do all these standing around, throwing drills, pitching drills, even ones from my book, from my YouTube channel. Those are more for like honing the machine that's already been built, but you're building the machine from the ground up. And so what you should be doing is throwing with moving feet. That means shuffle your feet, do the outfield pro step, do the infield footwork. You'll find tutorials for those on my YouTube channel. Move your feet every time you throw. Get your feet moving. When your feet are moving, your body is going to work more as a unit. When your feet are planted, even doing good quality pitching drills, it's not going to be the same, and your body is not going to learn how to use the legs, how the legs connect to the torso, how the torso connects to the arms. You want to teach your body to throw as a system, as a whole unit first. And that comes from play-based throwing and your feet moving. So that's my number one thing. Grab a football, grab a vortex ball, grab a baseball, grab a softball. Be a good thrower of different types of balls and objects first. Throwing a football will translate to pitching a baseball on the mound, I promise you. Throwing a softball will translate to pitching on the mound. Because again, the biggest thing is fulfilling the core competency of being a good thrower first. And different types of balls will teach your body to do different things. They'll stimulate your arm in a different way. So that's definitely where I recommend starting. Lastly, just understand this is not a short road. It is very difficult and a very long road. I have thrown millions of baseballs in my life, and I was throwing 5, 6, 7 days a week, probably 5 or 6 days a week on average, if you start to average in like the off season, the slower times, for, 10 years, 8 to 18. And that's just getting me to the college level. I was a thrower of things every single day. There's a lot of throwing. So again, I know as adults, we think we can pick things up really fast. It's going to take a long time. So stick with it. If you love it, you enjoy what you're doing, that's phenomenal. It should just be something that you enjoy, that's getting you out of the house, that's getting you to move your body in a new way. Learning a new thing is super fun. It's no different than if you're picking up golf, or if you're picking up pickleball, or picking up tennis. You want to pick up throwing, you want to be a pitcher one day, that's totally fine. Just understand that it's going to take a long time. It's going to be harder to pick up than tennis. It's going to be harder to pick up than most of these sports, because it's a really complicated motion. Even though when you watch people throw, we've been doing it a long time, it seems very effortless and smooth and easy. It's complex. It will take a while. Stick with it. So I really hope you're doing it just to do it, not for some bigger payoff. If you enjoy throwing and you enjoy learning about it, then you're on the right track. All right. Hopefully this video was helpful. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment or a question if you have one, and I'll see you here on my next video.